Welcome to lesson 2. What is a share? Now, in lesson 1, we explored the topic of what is a company. Now, in lesson 2, we're going to transition specifically to public companies because not all companies have shares. Not all companies are required to divide the ownership into shares. So, certain non-profits and so forth, they don't really need to have a share structure. However, public companies like Microsoft and Apple and Google, like we touched on in lesson 1, they are required to have shares because they are raising capital from the general public. So they are required to divide the ownership of their business into shares. Now, they might have different tiers, like there might be preferred shares, or there might be Class A, Class B, and so forth. Notwithstanding, they're required to divide the ownership of their business into shares. So a public company is a business, according to Google, AI is a business that sells shares of its ownership to the general public via a stock exchange, allowing anyone in the world to buy and become a part owner. And in return, the company must follow strict rules. They must report their financial reporting to the Securities Exchange Commission in the United States for those listed in the U.S. markets every quarter. So, most of the time at the end of March, then at the end of June, then at the end of September, and then the end of December, they have to submit their earnings reports and so on to the Securities Exchange Commission, which in turn disseminates this information to the public, right? So that's what a public company is, and a stock, also called an equity, represents a small piece or piece of the ownership in a public company, right? So when you own shares, and if the company pays a dividend, then you are entitled to whatever the dividend that they declare is per share. If the value of the share increases, then the profits, they're yours, right? So companies issue stocks to raise money, while investors buy these stocks, hoping that the company succeeds, and it appreciates in value, so that they can get financial gains, right? So you have a company, then you have public companies, because those are the ones that we're focusing on when we talk about stock trading, and then we have shares, stocks, equity, right? And these shares are listed on what are called stock exchanges or stock markets. Like you may have heard of the New York Stock Exchange or the Nasdaq in the past. So these facilitate the buying and selling of these shares in these public companies like Apple and Microsoft, from persons all over the world. So somebody in Russia, Australia, St. Vincent, they can buy, sell shares at any time once the stock markets the stock exchanges are open. Now, in the past, these exchanges used to be primarily physical locations where you have brokers, right? So these are persons who conduct buying and selling on behalf of the ordinary citizens like me and you, right? So they used to be physical buying and selling. So they would say, hey, I want to sell 100 shares of Apple at $55 per share. And then another broker would say, hey, I have a client who would like to buy those 100 shares. And then you'd have an exchange of ownership. And then the last price for Apple would be $55 a share, right? So there you have it, guys. Lesson 2, public company. What is a public company? What is a share, stock, or equity? And what facilitates the buying and selling? The stock exchanges. And with the stock exchanges, we have stockbrokers who work on our behalf to help us to buy and sell. And before, it used to be physical buying and selling, and then it used to be buying and selling using telephones. So you call your broker and say, hey, I want to sell my 1,000 shares of Microsoft, and then the broker would call another broker to find a market and so on. However, in modern times, most of the trading occurs online through software platforms, which I will show you later on. And these platforms show you all of the available buyers and all available sellers all over the world at all prices, in real time. So there you have it, guys. Lesson 2, stock exchanges, stockbrokers. We need to have a firm understanding of these things. Again, please feel free to do further research on these topics before proceeding to lesson 3.